Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. It is far better to take things as they come along with patience and equanimity. Through pride, we are ever deceiving ourselves. But deep down below the surface of the average conscience, a still small voice says to us, something is out of tune. As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order. We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. A particularly beautiful woman is a source of terror. As a rule, a beautiful woman is a terrible disappointment. The healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. The pendulum of the mind alternates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. The creative mind plays with the objects it loves. The word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. One looks back with appreciation to the brilliant teachers, but with gratitude to those who touched our human feelings. The curriculum is so much necessary raw material, but warmth is the vital element for the growing plant and for the soul of the child. The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, there love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other. Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol or morphine or idealism. We are born at a given moment, in a given place, and, like vintage years of wine, we have the qualities of the year and of the season of which we are born. Astrology does not lay claim to anything more. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. Knowledge rests not upon truth alone, but upon error also. The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it. Children are educated by what the grown-up is and not by his talk. A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. A human being would certainly not grow to be 70 or 80 years old if this longevity had no meaning for the species. The afternoon of human life must also have a significance of its own and cannot be merely a pitiful appendage to life's morning. Often the hands will solve a mystery that the intellect has struggled with in vain. It all depends on how we look at things, and not how they are in themselves. The most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. It is just these intense conflicts and their conflagration which are needed to produce valuable and lasting results. There is no such thing as a pure introvert or extrovert. Such a person would be in the lunatic asylum. If there is anything that we wish to change in the child, we should first examine it and see whether it is not something that could better be changed in ourselves. If one does not understand a person, one tends to regard him as a fool. When an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. Man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health. Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. Show me a sane man, and I will cure him for you. Masses are always breeding grounds of psychic epidemics. It is a fact that cannot be denied. The wickedness of others becomes our own wickedness because it kindles something evil in our own hearts. Dreams are the guiding words of the soul. Why should I henceforth not love my dreams and not make their riddling images into objects of my daily consideration? We should not pretend to understand the world only by the intellect. The judgment of the intellect is only part of the truth. The man who promises everything is sure to fulfill nothing, and everyone who promises too much is in danger of using evil means in order to carry out his promises and is already on the road to perdition. For a young person, it is almost a sin, or at least a danger, to be too preoccupied with himself. But for the aging person, it is a duty and a necessity to devote serious attention to himself. The debt we owe to the play of imagination is incalculable. Who has fully realized that history is not contained in thick books, but lives in our very blood? Follow that will and that way, which experience confirms to be your own. Man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. Mistakes are, after all, the foundations of truth, and if a man does not know what a thing is, it is at least an increase in knowledge if he knows what it is not. We deem those happy who from the experience of life have learnt to bear its ills without being overcome by them. We shall probably get nearest to the truth if we think of the conscious and personal psyche as resting upon the broad basis of an inherited and universal psychic disposition, which is as such unconscious, and that our personal psyche bears the same relation to the collective psyche as the individual to society. We are in a far better position to observe instincts in animals or in primitives than in ourselves. This is due to the fact that we have grown accustomed to scrutinizing our own actions and to seeking rational explanations for them. Our heart glows and secret unrest gnaws at the root of our being. Dealing with the unconscious has become a question of life for us. Understanding does not cure evil, but it is a definite help, inasmuch as one can cope with a comprehensible darkness. I have treated many hundreds of patients. Among those in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. The collective unconscious consists of the sum of the instincts and their correlates, the archetypes. Just as everybody possesses instincts, so he also possesses a stock of archetypal images. Nobody, as long as he moves about among the chaotic currents of life, is without trouble. A scream is always just that, a noise and not music. Resistance to the organized mass can be effected only by the man who is as well organized in his individuality as the mass itself. Shrinking away from death is something unhealthy and abnormal, which robs the second half of life of its purpose. All the works of man have their origin in creative fantasy. What right have we then to depreciate imagination? Sometimes, indeed, there is such a discrepancy between the genius and his human qualities that one has to ask oneself whether a little less talent might not have been better. A psychoneurosis must be understood ultimately as the suffering of a soul which has not discovered its meaning. Great talents are the most lovely and often the most dangerous fruits on the tree of humanity. They hang upon the most slender twigs that are easily snapped off. Without this playing with fantasy, no creative work has ever yet come to birth. The debt we owe to the play of the imagination is incalculable. The wine of youth does not always clear with advancing years. Sometimes it grows turbid. The word belief is a difficult thing for me. I don't believe. I must have a reason for a certain hypothesis. Either I know a thing, and then I know it. I don't need to believe it. Everyone knows nowadays that people have complexes. What is not so well known, though far more important theoretically, is that complexes can have us. It all depends on how we look at things, and not how they are in themselves. Great talents are the most lovely and often the most dangerous fruits on the tree of humanity. They hang upon the most slender twigs that are easily snapped off. Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other. Shame is a soul-eating emotion. The rational attitude which permits us to declare objective values as valid at all is not the work of the individual subject, but the product of human history. Nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on their environment, and especially on their children, than the unlived life of the parent. To ask the right question is already half the solution of a problem. To me, dreams are part of nature, which harbors no intention to deceive but expresses something as best it can. The capacity for directed thinking I call intellect. The capacity for passive or undirected thinking I call intellectual intuition. I have always been impressed by the fact that there are a surprising number of individuals who never use their minds if they can avoid it, and an equal number who do use their minds, but in an amazingly stupid way. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. Creative powers can just as easily turn out to be destructive. It rests solely with the moral personality. Whether they apply themselves to good things or to bad, and if this is lacking, no teacher can supply it or take its place. That which compels us to create a substitute for ourselves is not the external lack of objects, but our incapacity to lovingly include a thing outside of ourselves. A dream that is not understood remains a mere occurrence. Understood, it becomes a living experience. A special ability means a heavy expenditure of energy in a particular direction, with a consequent drain from some other side of life. We should not pretend to understand the world only by the intellect. We apprehend it just as much by feeling. Therefore, the judgment of the intellect is, at best, only the half of truth, and must, if it be honest, also come to an understanding of its inadequacy. If a man knows more than others, he becomes lonely. I regret many follies which sprang from my obstinacy, but without that trait, I would not have reached my goal. As any change must begin somewhere, it is the single individual who will experience it and carry it through. The change must indeed begin with an individual. It might be any one of us. Nobody can afford to look round and to wait for somebody else to do what he is loath to do himself. When we consider the infinite variety of dreams, it is difficult to conceive that there could ever be a method or a technical procedure which would lead to an infallible result. It is indeed a good thing that no valid method exists, for otherwise the meaning of the dream would be limited in advance and would lose precisely that virtue which makes dreams so valuable for therapeutic purposes, their ability to offer new points of view. I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. The first half of life is devoted to forming a healthy ego. The second half is going inward and letting go of it. It is often tragic to see how blatantly a man bungles his own life and the lives of others, yet remains totally incapable of seeing how much the whole tragedy originates in himself and how he continually feeds it and keeps it going. I shall not commit the fashionable stupidity of regarding everything I cannot explain as a fraud. The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. Find out what a person fears most, and that is where he will develop next. The pendulum of the mind oscillates between sense and nonsense, not between right and wrong. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling. There are as many nights as days, and the one is just as long as the other in the year's course. Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. Nobody can fall so low unless he has a great depth.